Morning, friends. Somebody told me one time that religion, it works in theory, but not in practice. Now, the plan won't work unless you work the plan. And if you're not working the plan, you shouldn't expect it to work. But the plan is not theoretical, it's a practical experience. And if your religion is not based on experience, then that's weak faith. Hebrews 11 verse 6, without faith it's impossible to please God. This is faith that is cultivated by virtue of an experience. And if you're trying to learn about religion in a classroom, you're learning it in the wrong place. Because theory and practice are as different as a night and day. People say, well, in theory and practice are the same thing. But in practice, they are not. I'll give you just a couple of examples. If a surgeon only learns to practice his trade in a classroom, would you want to be his first patient? No. You gain something in the classroom. Your theoretical knowledge is, it's good to a point. Then you go into the laboratory of life, and then you try to put into practice what you're learning in the classroom. And if all you have is the classroom experience, then you've got no practical experience. An example, cutting a tree down. If you only study cutting a tree down, like with a chainsaw, if you only study in a book how to cut a tree down, my dear friends, you are not prepared to take the chainsaw and go into the woods. I'll give you an example. This is a tree I cut, and when it fell over, it hung up in the tree next door. And to try to get the tree down safely, it's not something you learn in a book, you learn from doing. Here's a picture of a tree that I cut down, and as you can see, it landed on the next tree beside it. So in theory, you just cut down through, you undercut it, you cut it a segment at a time, and it brings the tree out of the woods. So let's see if we can put practice and theory into effect. Darlene and I lived very theoretical lives, and when we met on that first date, talking about star charts and the zodiac, and by the way, she told me I was a Cancer, born on the cusp of Cancer and Leo, and she said a Cancer, the constellation for the Cancer, the zodiac sign for Cancer is a crab, and she told me I was crabby. I don't know what she said, mean-spirited, emotional, I don't know exactly what she said. Maybe there was a lot of truth in that at the time. But when we talked about those things and we talked about reading palms in the future, that's just all theory. There's not really a bit of substance in any of that kind of talk because it's not life-changing. It's never really practical. You can talk about the position of the stars. What does that do for me today? You can talk about the lines in my hand and, well, I might have, this in my future and that in my future. How does that change me now? It's just completely bogus, theoretical, and it has no meaning whatsoever. Darlene, when she was in high school, I was playing basketball, but she was on the cheerleading team. Now this is Darlene, dressed up in her VH Valley Head sweater and a cheerleading uniform, and going out there on Friday nights in the winter, doing these little cheers for the football team. That's a bunch of ridiculous theoretical living. There's nothing real in the whole thing. What are you doing? I mean, you're cheering people on to try to get a basketball in the hole or a football across the goal line. It makes no sense. So at the end of the day, you're a theoretical person. That means if you're living in a city in a false artificial environment, you become a superficial, false artificial thinker because there's nothing real. In the city, I mean, what is there that's real? In the garden, now that's reality. When you put something into effect in the garden, you see if it works very quickly. There's no theory out there in the garden. Well, if I plant the seed, what's going to happen? Dear friends, you put the seed in the ground, it rains, the sun shines, and you get food. It's just as far from theory as the East is from the West. And you can sit there and cheer all night in a football game, but it does not change you or change your life. And that's what practical religion does. The emphasis of practical religion is having something in your life change as you put into practice that which you read in a book. Even the Bible, you read it in the Bible and then you put it into practice. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 7, you walk by faith and not by sight. You actually live what you learn, and in living it, you learn it in a way that you can't learn it in any other way. You know, when we finished our pizza, drank our beer, finished our pizza, getting ready to go, the waitress brings the check. Darlene says to me, we're going Dutch. I'm paying my half, you're paying your half. I had no intention of asking her to pay half the bill, but this is Darlene's mindset. This is theoretical thinking. I guess you learned that out of a magazine somewhere. But then went out to the car, got ready to open the door. She said, don't open that door for me. I'll open the door for myself. You know, she's equal. So she opened the door, got in the car. And as I sat down beside her, I thought, I didn't think it at the time. Looking back in retrospect, I think it. You know, we were some theoretical human beings. Neither one of us had half an experience between us. Now, the problem with that is you're living on theory, and the theory's not right. If your foundation is rotten, then the storm hits and you collapse. When Darlene saw a rattlesnake in the garden, this is, of course, years later, saw a rattlesnake out in the garden, she began to yell for me. Lou, she's yelling for me. And, of course, I run up there, and she says, that's a rattlesnake. All of a sudden, there were some feminine, masculine characteristics developing there in the garden. My job was to take care of the rattlesnake. All things are equal, and I can do whatever you can do, and I can do it just as well. All that flew out the window, because when the rattlesnake came, Darlene knew that's a man's job. And so I took care of the rattlesnake. But you know, same thing with raising children. I know how to change a diaper, Darlene does too. In the kitchen, I know how to wash a dish, and she does too. But when it comes to having children and raising children, my dear friends, I'm at a loss. Can't do it like Darlene could. Now, in the home, you know, everybody has a little trial every now and then. You know, even the best of marriages, maybe there's a little dispute or conflict every now and then. And Darlene and I, you know, very, very rarely ever have some sort of dispute, but, you know, occasionally it happens. Now, that raises the question, if the husband and the wife are not on good terms, somebody's got to make the first move. And is it going to be the husband or the wife? My dear friends, this is the role that God gave to the man. He is the leader, he's the high priest, he is the wall of protection in the home. And if there is a problem inside that marriage, it is the husband's duty to take hold, set things right. Now, if the husband will not do his job, certainly the wife ought to step up and do it. But in God's great plan, the husband, the servant of the home, he takes it upon himself to do all that he can to reconcile the relationship. And it is impossible to be able to conduct a marriage in a happy fashion and have that kind of relationship unless you've got a whole lot of love for each other. You've got to have a lot of love, because it takes love to make that kind of relationship work. So my dear friends, without love, this doesn't really mean anything. And love is a principle. You cannot learn love in a classroom. Empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, these are not learned out of a dictionary, not learned through a textbook, not learned in a classroom. These are the kind of things you got to experience. You got to taste and see Psalm 34:8 that the Lord is good. So friends, as we try to get away from the theoretical, as we try to understand the experience gained in our own testimony, as we try to walk with Christ in this world and the world to come, may God help us to gain some lessons that will fit us up for a real life in heaven. Not a sit-down classroom theorizing place in the kingdom of God, but a put it into practice, live your life for God kind of experience in the great kingdom called heaven. My dear friends, God bless you. You have a nice day.